How many rental properties do you need to never work again? That's a question I get asked all the time. And whenever I ask people what they think the number is, almost all of them say the same thing, around 30 to 40 doors. And that one belief is a huge part of why most of them stay stuck renting for the rest of their lives. See, after closing more than 200 loans and approving over $40 million in mortgage financing, I've watched clients walk away from their jobs on just 5 properties, while other people sitting on 20 are still grinding, still trapped, still clocking in every morning. So it was never about how many doors you own. It came down to one number. And once you know yours, you know exactly how many properties stand between you and the day you never have to work again. So in the next few minutes, I'm gonna give you the math to find that number plus the financing moves that shrink it way down faster than you think. But first, we need to clear up what never work again actually means, because you've probably been sold the version where you're lying on a beach for 40 years sipping pina coladas. That's not what I mean. What I'm talking about is the moment your rental income covers every bill you have. So the job becomes something you show up because you want to, not because you have to. That's the day that nobody owns your time but you. And that finish line is a lot closer than 40 doors, but only if you measure it right, because almost everybody measures it wrong. And that one mistake sends them chasing a number 3 times bigger than what they actually need. But that was never about how many properties you own. It's about how much it costs to be you for 1 month. That's your rent, your mortgage, your car, your groceries, your insurance, your phone, the nights out, all the little subscriptions you forget you're even paying for. And when you add up every bit of it, you get one honest number. That number, that's your finish line, not the door count. Because the day your properties bring in more than that every month, the job turns into a choice. Now, for most people I sit down with, that finish line lands somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000 a month. And when you go to figure out yours, use what you actually spend, not some fantasy budget where you suddenly stop eating out and cancel every nice thing in your life. Because if you lowball it to make the number look easier, you'll hit it and still feel broke, which is an even worse spot than never starting at all. So nail down that number, because that's what we're about to turn into the exact number of properties that you need to buy. But before we do that, I've got to warn you about a mistake that almost everybody makes when looking at a rental property, because they see a place renting for $2,000 a month and they think that's $2,000 towards freedom. So in their head, if they need $6,000 to live, that's just 3 little houses and they're done. And that's exactly how people end up quitting their jobs way too early, only to come crawling back 6 months later. Because here's what they never stop to check. That $2,000 rent check was never really theirs to keep. Actually, wasn't even close. Because before a single dollar of it ever reaches you, that rent has to cover a whole stack of bills first. The mortgage eats first, and it eats the most. Then the taxes, the insurance take their bite. And here in Florida, that insurance has gotten brutal. You're setting money aside for the months it's empty, because no place stays rented forever. And setting more aside for when stuff breaks, because something always does. And if you don't want to deal with the day-to-day headaches yourself, a property manager, they want their slice too. So by the time all of it clears, you're lucky to keep a third of what that tenant pays you. So that same $2,000 check on a good deal really only leaves you $200 to $400 a month. And that's a number that actually matters, not the actual rent. Because the people who look at only the rent think they're 3 doors away from quitting. And then they actually quit. A few months later, they're right back at it to their same job. And by the way, if you're getting value out of this so far, do me a quick favor and hit the like and subscribe button. It tells YouTube to show this video to more people who are actually trying to figure this stuff out, and it costs you nothing. So the number was never some fixed wall at 40, and it bends around 2 things: how much it costs to be you and how hard each property cash flows. Now, the first one is on you. Just keep your life from getting bloated. But the second one is where the real money is, and almost nobody knows how to do it. So that begs the question: how do you actually get a property to cash flow that hard? And before I give you the answer, I want to show you a property that I actually own, because the moves I'm about to teach you are the exact ones that made this one work. I picked this up for about $256,000, a place most buyers wouldn't even touch, because when you first look at it, it came with problems that scared everybody else off. But those exact problems are the whole reason that it cash flows the way that it currently does, because it rents through Section 8, which means a big chunk of that rental income comes straight from the government on time every month, whether the economy is booming or it's falling apart. And that changes everything about the freedom math. Because the scariest part of leaning on rental income is a chance that it could stop. Maybe the tenant loses their job, or maybe there's a recession, or people just stop paying. But with a government check covering a big piece of that rent, that fear just melts away. And you know that the money is going to be there whether the economy is good or bad. And to actually run the numbers on a deal like this, you take the rent, pull out the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, set a little aside for empty months and for repairs, and whatever's left, that's your cash flow. Because I bought this one cheap and part of the rent is locked in by the government, the cash flow comes out way stronger than a property that somebody else overpaid for, which means one door like this can do the work of 2 or 3 weak ones, and your number just got cut in half. Now, the reason that property works so well comes down to 3 moves I made when I bought it, and they're the same 3 moves that you can use on any deal you ever look at. Move number 1 is how you buy, and most beginners get this completely backward because they hop on Zillow, finding the nicest move-in ready house that they can afford and pay a full price for it because it looks safe and it feels easy. Then they wonder why the property will barely cash flow or loses them money every single month. But it's actually pretty simple. When you pay top dollar, your mortgage eats almost the whole rent check before a single dollar ever reaches you. So the investors who actually hit their number do the opposite. They make their money the day they buy, not the day they sell. So they go after the property nobody else wants, the one with the bad tenants or the violation or the kitchen that hasn't been touched since 1985. And they buy it cheap because of that problem. A lower price means a smaller mortgage, which means way more of that rent check ends up in your pocket. That's the whole reason one investor walks away with $500 a door, while the guy who bought the pretty house down the street is barely making $150. Now, move number 2 is the financing. And this is where most people hit a wall they never saw coming because they assume that the way they bought their first house, going to a regular bank with their pay stubs and tax returns, is how you buy all of them. And that may work for the first 1 or 2, but then the bank starts saying no. Even though you're making good money and your rentals are covering themselves, and the reason is that a regular bank loan is based on your personal income. So every property that you buy adds more debt to your personal name. After a few houses, the bank pulls up your file, sees too much debt, and shuts the door, usually right around that 3rd or 4th property. And that's where most investors freeze and never grow again. But there's a completely different kind of loan that doesn't care about your tax returns or your day job at all, because it only looks at whether the property owns rent, covers its cost or not. So if the house pays for itself, you qualify, no matter how much you already own. And that ceiling just disappears because each property qualifies on its own instead of being attached to you. That's how people build 10, 15, and even 20 doors, while bank-only crowd is still stuck at 4, trying to explain why they should be allowed to buy another house. And that one shift from a loan based on your income to one based on the property itself is what turns this from a hobby into something you can actually scale to your number, which leads us to number 3. This is where we put the focus on the money, because most people look at how many properties they need to buy, do the math on the down payments, and they give up right there. They'd assume they need to save a fresh pile of cash for every single property that they want to buy. So they do the math and they figure it'll take 40 years to save up enough money, and they give up before they ever buy the first one. But that's all BS. You don't actually need 12 down payments. You just need 1, and you keep recycling it. And the way it works is that you buy a cheap property, you fix it up, and now it's worth way more than you paid for it. Then you refinance based on the new value, which lets you pull out most of your original cash. And the best part is that you don't pay any tax on it because it's a loan. It's not income. That's how regular people, just like you, get to double digits without starting out rich, by using the same money over and over again until every property is paid for. So if you actually run those 3 moves, the 40 doors you may have been dreading turn into something way more reasonable. Maybe it's 12, maybe it's 10, maybe even fewer if you keep your life lean. And this isn't a 30-year project, by the way. It's something that most people could hit in a few years if they would just start the right way. And starting the right way means getting that first loan approved without spinning your wheels for months, especially if you're self-employed or you've already had a bank turn you down once. So if you want to know exactly how to do that, I broke down the 5 steps to get approved in this video over here that you can check out. Go watch it, and I'll see you there.